My hands trembled as I unfolded the yellowed letter hidden beneath the loose floorboard in my mother-in-law's bedroom. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. My dear Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and my children have taken everything from you. But what I left for you is far greater than money. Look under the old oak tree in the backyard. Dig where the roots twist like a heart. What you find there will change everything. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. What could she have left me? And why had she hidden it from her own children? It all started 5 years ago when my mother-in-law, Martha, had her stroke. One moment, she was laughing in the kitchen, flour dusting her apron as she rolled out dough for her famous apple pie. The next, she collapsed, her body stiff and unresponsive. The doctors said she'd never walk again. Her children, my husband, David, and his sister, Linda, visited the hospital once, then disappeared. We have our own lives, Sarah, David had said, shrugging. You're better at this kind of thing. So I became Martha's full-time caregiver. I quit my job, sold my car to pay the medical bills, and spent every day by her side. At first, she was angry, furious at her body for failing her. But slowly, she softened. We talked for hours, shared secrets, and even laughed together. She became more than just my mother-in-law. She became my friend. Then, 3 months ago, Martha passed away in her sleep. I held her hand as she took her last breath, whispering, "Thank you for loving me when no one else did." The funeral was small. David and Linda showed up in expensive suits, their eyes dry. The moment the service ended, they stormed into Martha's house like vultures. "We'll handle everything," Linda said, shoving past me. By the next day, the house was emptied. The family jewelry, the savings account, even Martha's favorite rocking chair, all gone. David handed me a single box of old photo albums. "Here. Since you cared so much about her." I didn't fight them. What was the point? But as I cleaned the house one last time, I noticed a loose floorboard in Martha's room. Beneath it was the letter. And now, with my heart in my throat, I grabbed a shovel and ran to the backyard. The old oak tree stood tall, its roots twisting into the earth like gnarled fingers. I dug where Martha said, my hands covered in dirt. Then, clink. My breath caught. A small metal box. I pried it open, and inside was a stack of papers, legal documents, a deed, and a handwritten note. "Sarah, this house was never in my children's name. It's yours. And so is everything else they stole." A sob escaped my throat. All this time, while David and Linda acted like they owned the place, it had been mine. But then, footsteps. I snapped the box shut and whirled around. David stood at the back door, his arms crossed. "What are you doing out here?" His eyes flicked to the shovel, then the box in my hands. My pulse roared in my ears. "Just cleaning up." He took a step closer. "That doesn't look like cleaning." I clutched the box tighter. If he found out. 2 days after Martha's funeral, I had gone to the bank to close her accounts, only to be told I had no authority. "The estate is being handled by her children," the banker said. I didn't argue. I just left, feeling foolish for ever thinking I'd be included. But now, holding this box, everything made sense. Martha had included me. She just hadn't told anyone. I spent the rest of the day hiding the box under my bed, my mind racing. If David and Linda found out, they'd fight me. And I didn't have money for lawyers. That night, I dreamed of Martha. She sat in her rocking chair, smiling. "You were the daughter I always wanted," she whispered. "Don't let them take what's yours." I woke up with tears on my face. The next morning, I called the only person I trusted, my best friend, Rachel. "Meet me at the cafe," I said. "I need to show you something." Rachel's eyes widened as I slid the deed across the table. "Sarah, this is huge. You own the house." I nodded. "And the land. And whatever money is left in her private account." Rachel grabbed my hand. "You have to tell David and Linda before they sell everything." "I can't." "They'll." My phone buzzed. A text from David. "Hey, we found a buyer for Mom's house. They are coming tomorrow to finalize. Be there by 10. My blood ran cold. Rachel saw my face. "What's wrong?" I showed her the text. Her grip tightened. "Sarah, you have to stop them." "But how?" "If I told them now, they'd accuse me of stealing. They'd never believe Martha gave it to me willingly." I needed proof. And then I remembered Martha's lawyer. I drove to Mr. Henderson's office, my hands slick on the wheel. He was an old man, Martha's attorney for decades. If anyone knew the truth, it was him. The receptionist frowned when I walked in. Do you have an appointment? No, but I need to see him. It's about Martha Wilkes' estate. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. A minute later, Mr. Henderson appeared, his glasses perched on his nose. Sarah, he said softly. I was wondering when you'd come. My breath hitched. You knew? He nodded. Come inside. I followed him into his office, hope flaring in my chest. But before he could speak, my phone rang. It was David. I ignored it. Then Linda called. And called again. Mr. Henderson's face darkened. You should answer. I swallowed hard and picked up. Linda's voice was sharp. Where the hell are you? The buyers are here now. I froze. But, it's not even 10 yet. They came early. And guess what? The deed isn't in our names. It's in yours. Silence. Then David's voice, cold and dangerous. We're coming for you, Sarah. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto Mr. Henderson's desk. The lawyer's eyes widened as David's threat echoed through the speaker. We're coming for you, Sarah. The words slithered through the air like a snake coiling to strike. Mr. Henderson moved with sudden urgency, his aged hands surprisingly steady as he locked the office door. Listen carefully, he said, pressing a set of car keys into my palm. Take my Bic out the service entrance. They'll be watching your vehicle. I stared at the keys, my mind racing. But the deed, the will, are ironclad. He pulled a manila envelope from his safe. Martha updated everything 6 months ago. Knew her children would pull this. His fingers trembled slightly as he handed me documents stamped with red notary seals. But legal papers won't stop them from harassing you. Go to the cabin. The cabin? My throat tightened. Martha had mentioned a lakeside retreat years ago. But a fist pounded on the office door. Sarah, open up. David's voice, sharp as broken glass. Mr. Henderson shoved me toward a back hallway. 3 miles past the old mill on Route 17. Keys under the blue flower pot. Another thunderous knock shook the door frame. Go. I ran through dim corridors, my pulse roaring in my ears. The service elevator descended with agonizing slowness. Through the grimy basement windows, I spotted Linda pacing near my car, her designer heels cutting angry lines in the gravel. The Bic's engine turned over with a quiet purr. I crouched low as I drove past the parking lot, catching a glimpse of David storming out the building's front doors, face mottled with rage. Only when I merged onto the highway did I let out the breath I'd been holding. Rain began pelting the windshield as I turned onto Route 17. The documents sat heavy on the passenger seat, the deed, Martha's updated will, and something new, a life insurance policy with my name as sole beneficiary. The numbers made me gasp. Enough to disappear forever. The cabin emerged from the downpour like a ghost. Weathered cedar planks, a sagging porch, and sure enough, a chipped blue flower pot guarding a rusted key. Inside smelled of pine and mothballs. I collapsed onto the scratchy plaid couch, the events of the past hour crashing over me in waves. A glint of metal caught my eye. Above the fireplace hung an antique key rack, but only one key remained, small, tarnished, with Safe Deposit Box 114 engraved on its bow. Martha's shaky handwriting on the tag beneath read, "When you're ready to know everything." The floorboards creaked behind me. I whirled around, grabbing the fireplace poker. A shadow moved in the kitchen doorway. Then a voice, rough as sandpaper, "Took you long enough." The poker clattered to the floor. "Ruth?" Martha's gruff best friend leaned against the doorframe, her silver braid gleaming in the dim light. She tossed a newspaper onto the coffee table. The headline screamed, "Local heiress missing after inheritance dispute." My face stared back from the front page. David filed a police report, Ruth said, lighting a cigarette. "Claims you manipulated Martha and stole the documents." She blew smoke toward the rafters. "Got a detective friend says he's hired private security to bring you in." I sank onto the couch. I can't fight this. They have money, connections. And you have this. Ruth dropped a battered composition book in my lap. Martha's familiar scrawl covered every page. Her diary from the last year. Read it. Then decide if you're running or fighting. The first entry froze my blood. April 12th. Found the bank statements David hid. He's been stealing from the estate for years. Worse, I recognized the account numbers, same ones from Edward's business before he died. My God. The boys learned from their father. Page after page revealed the rot beneath the family's polished surface. Offshore accounts. forged signatures, and one final entry dated the night before her stroke. Sarah must never know the truth about Edward's death. But if something happens to me, give her the safety deposit key. The police report is still there. A car door slammed outside. Ruth moved like lightning, killing the lights and peering through the curtains. Black SUV. 2 men. Not cops. She grabbed my arm. Back exit, now. We crashed through dense undergrowth as shouts erupted behind us. My lungs burned as we reached Ruth's pickup truck. Tires spit gravel as we fishtailed onto the road. Where now? I gasped. Ruth's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Only one place left. The bank. As we sped toward town, I clutched Martha's diary to my chest. Whatever waited in that safety deposit box, David was willing to kill to keep it hidden. The grandfather clock in the town square chimed midnight as we skidded to a stop outside First National. Ruth disabled the alarm with unsettling ease. Perks of dating the security guard in 78. The vault door groaned open, revealing rows of gleaming metal boxes. Box 114 held 3 items: a police report dated the night Edward died, a blood-stained handkerchief monogrammed EW, and a faded photograph of David at 18, standing over his father's body with a golf club in his hands. Martha's final note fluttered to the floor. Self-defense, they called it. But I saw David's face that night. He was smiling. Sirens wailed in the distance. Ruth met my eyes. Decision time, kid. That report proves David's violent history. Enough to get a restraining order and freeze the estate proceedings. She nodded to the photo. Or we take this to the DA and end this for good. Headlights swept across the bank's windows. Tires screeched outside. I slipped the evidence into my jacket as the glass doors exploded inward. Sarah Whitfield. A flashlight blinded me. Police. Hands where we can see them. Behind the officers, David's smirk gleamed in the shadows. My fingers tightened around the photograph. Martha's voice whispered in my memory, "Don't let them take what's yours." I stepped forward, holding the blooded handkerchief high. "Officer, I'd like to report a murder." The police station's fluorescent lights buzzed like angry hornets overhead. I sat at a scarred wooden table, Martha's evidence laid out before me like a grotesque museum exhibit. The blood-stained handkerchief. The damning photograph. The police report that never made it to court. Officer Delgado's pen hovered over his notepad. "You're saying this proves David Whitfield murdered his father?" "Not proved," corrected the gray-haired detective leaning against the wall, Ruth's friend, apparently. "But it certainly warrants reopening a 20-year-old case." His badge read Lieutenant Carson. Across the room, David lounged in his own interrogation chair, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. Even now, he looked more annoyed than afraid. His eyes met mine through the glass partition, and his lips curled into that same chilling smile from the photograph. A commotion erupted in the hallway. Linda burst through the doors, her designer handbag swinging wildly. "This is ridiculous. My brother was a child when our father died." She slammed a manicured hand on the table, making the evidence jump. "And you're taking the word of some gold-digging nurse over family?" Lieutenant Carson didn't flinch. "We take forensic evidence most seriously. This blood sample alone was from a golf accident." Linda's shrill voice cracked. "Dad cut his hand on a club. David helped him to the house. That photo proves nothing." I reached into my jacket pocket. "Then explain this." The room fell silent as I placed Martha's tape recorder on the table. Ruth had found it in the cabin's rafters, another of Martha's hidden treasures. Linda paled. "Where did you?" I pressed play. Martha's voice, weak but clear, filled the room. "Edward told me tonight he was cutting David out of the will. Said he'd discovered the embezzlement." David laughed and said, a shuddering breath. He said, "Wills can be changed, Dad. Just ask Grandpa." A glass shattered in the background. "Oh God." His picking up the recording cut off with a thud. David's chair screeched as he stood up. "That's a fake. My mother was senile." Lieutenant Carson's hand settled on his service weapon. "Sit down, Mr. Whitfield. We're not done here." The interrogation stretched into hours. By dawn, they'd arrested David on suspicion of murder. Linda fled before they could question her about the embezzlement Martha had documented. As I stepped into the pink light of morning, Ruth handed me a steaming coffee. "One battle won," she grunted. "War's far from over." She wasn't wrong. The next 48 hours became a blur of legal maneuvers. David made bail within hours, Whitfield money at work. A judge temporarily froze Martha's estate pending further investigation, which meant I couldn't access the house or accounts. And the local news painted me as either a heroic whistleblower or a scheming opportunist, depending on the channel.
But the real nightmare began on the third day.
I was staying at Ruth's cramped apartment above her bait shop when my phone lit up with a blocked number. The text showed a photo of my childhood home in Michigan, where my frail mother still lived. The message read, "Drop the charges by 5 p.m. or Mom gets a visit." My hands shook so badly I dropped the phone. Ruth scooped it up, her face hardening as she read the threat. "Linda's work," she spat. "David's too arrogant for subtlety." We raced to Lieutenant Carson's office, but he just steepled his fingers. "Without proof it came from Linda, there's nothing we can do."
But he slid a card across his desk.
"My niece runs a security firm.
She could relocate your mother quietly."
The clock ticked toward 5 p.m. as I dialed my mother, inventing a story about winning a luxury seniors cruise. Ruth's friend at the airline got her on the last flight to Miami, where a no-questions-asked security team would meet her. As her plane took off, another text arrived, "Smart girl. But the game's not over." That night, I dreamed of Martha standing at the foot of my bed, her paralyzed fingers brushing my cheek. "The oak tree," she whispered. "You didn't dig deep enough."
I woke with a start.
The digital clock read 3:07 a.m. Ruth snored on the couch, a shotgun across her lap. I crept to the kitchen and opened Martha's diary to a page I'd overlooked, a sketch of the oak tree with measurements. Not just where the roots twisted like a heart, but how deep. At sunrise, we drove back to Martha's house, now a crime scene with yellow tape fluttering on the porch. The oak tree stood untouched in the backyard, its leaves whispering in the morning breeze. We dug past the metal box, past where the roots thickened, until the shovel struck something solid. A rusted lockbox the size of a suitcase. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a trove of documents that made my knees give out. Edward Whitfield's Real financial records, offshore account numbers, and a ledger detailing payments to a Judge Harold Renfrew, the same judge who'd ruled Edward's death an accident.
Ruth let out a low whistle. "This ain't just about murder. This is a whole damn conspiracy."
As we loaded the evidence into Ruth's truck, a glint of sunlight reflected off something in the treehouse where David and Linda had played as children. Nestled in the rotting wood was a camcorder, its red light still blinking after all these years. The footage showed 17-year-old David and Judge Renfrew shaking hands beside Edward's body. The judge's voice crackled from the tiny speaker. "I'll make sure it's ruled accidental, for a percentage."
Ruth's phone rang as we watched.
Lieutenant Carson's voice sounded grim. "David's lawyer just filed a motion to dismiss.
Says you planted evidence.
And Sarah, they found your mother's flight records. Linda's on her way to Miami." The screen went dark as the camcorder battery died, but not before capturing David's youthful smirk, the same one he'd given me through the interrogation glass. Martha's final gift had arrived just in time. I grabbed Ruth's keys.
"Call Carson. Tell him we're coming with everything." The engine roared to life.
"Then get your detective friend to send everything he has on Judge Renfrew." As we sped toward the police station, the pieces clicked into place. This was never just about an inheritance. Martha had spent her final years gathering evidence to protect me from the viper's nest she married into.
And now it was my turn to finish what she started.
The clock tower struck noon as we burst into the DA's office. The receptionist took one look at our mud-stained clothes and the lockbox in Ruth's arms, then buzzed us straight through. Deputy District Attorney Vasquez didn't flinch when we dumped the contents across her desk. Her polished nails tapped the Edward Whitfield murder ledger. "This changes everything."
She reached for her phone.
"We're not just going after David anymore. We're taking down the whole damn system that protected him." As she dialed the FBI, I finally understood Martha's last words to me. This wasn't just about claiming an inheritance.
It was about breaking the cycle.
The FBI field office smelled like burnt coffee and stale ambition. Special Agent Ruiz barely glanced up from the ledger as I recounted every detail. The oak tree, the camcorder footage, Martha's years of silent investigation. Her partner, a granite-faced man named Colson, kept running his thumb over Judge Renfrew's name like he was polishing a tombstone. "Renfrew retired last year," Colson finally said. "Lives on a golf course in Boca Raton. Convenient."
Ruiz snapped the ledger shut. "We'll need you to wear a wire.
David Whitfield's lawyers have already filed harassment charges against you." She nodded to the security footage playing on her laptop, Linda boarding a Miami-bound flight, her carry-on suspiciously heavy. "And your mother's situation complicates things." Ruth's knuckles cracked as she clenched the armrests.
You got agents meeting that plane or what? Coulson's smile didn't reach his eyes. Better. We have Renfrew's granddaughter working as a cart girl at his country club. He slid a photo across the table. A young woman in a polo shirt, her smile not quite masking the wire hidden beneath her collar. He brags about the Whitfield case every time his 3 martinis deep. A cold realization settled in my stomach. They'd been building this case long before I stumbled into it. Martha's evidence was just the final piece. The sting operation unfolded with military precision. While Ruiz's team swept into Judge Renfrew's Boca Raton villa at 6:03 a.m., I found myself sitting across from David in an interrogation room again, this time with federal agents watching through one-way glass. You look tired, David said, his cuffed hands resting too casually on the table. The jailhouse orange jumpsuit didn't dull his polish. If anything, it made him look more dangerous, like a tiger in a zoo enclosure. Linda sends her regards. The wire taped between my shoulder blades itched. Where is she? Somewhere warm. His smile widened. With your mother. Agent Ruiz's voice crackled in my hidden earpiece, Renfrew's singing. Keep him talking about the payments. I slid a grainy photocopy across the table. The ledger entry showing $250,000 transferred to HR weeks after Edward's death. Why keep the evidence? You could have burned all this. David's fingertip traced the numbers. Sentimentality. First big score. His eyes flicked up, suddenly sharp. But you already knew that, didn't you? Mom's little spy. The air conditioning kicked on, raising goosebumps on my arms. She loved you. Sure. He leaned back, chains clinking. Loved me so much she spent her last years digging up dirt. Tell me, Sarah, his voice dropped to a whisper. When you were changing her diapers, did she ever mention the safety deposit box? My pulse stuttered. He knew. Maybe not the specifics, but enough. Ruiz's voice warned. His fishing. Don't react. The door burst open before I could respond. Lieutenant Carson strode in holding an evidence bag containing Linda's carry-on, and my mother's missing locket glinting inside. Flight attendant recognized Linda from the news, he said, loud enough for the recording devices. Found this in the bathroom trash after a distressed woman changed seats mid-flight. The blood drained from David's face. That's when I knew, Linda had overplayed her hand. Threatening my mother was his sister's idea, not his. I stood slowly, leaning over the table until our faces were inches apart. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell the FBI where Linda took my mother. In return, I'll ask the DA to take the death penalty off the table. His nostrils flared as I whispered the words Martha had written in her diary. Just ask Grandpa. The reference to Edward's father, another accidental death, hit its mark. David's lawyer started shouting about coercion, but it was too late. The dam had cracked. Key Largo, David muttered. Fishing cabin off marker 92. His glare could have melted steel. This isn't over. It took 17 hours for the Coast Guard to intercept Linda's rented pontoon boat. My mother emerged wrapped in a foil blanket, clutching the photo of my father she always carried in her wallet. Linda's arrest photo would grace the front page the next morning. Mascara streaked down her face, her designer blazer clashing with the handcuffs. But the real victory came 3 days later, in a Miami courtroom where Judge Renfrew pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice. His testimony unraveled everything. The cover-ups, the offshore accounts, even the original medical examiner's falsified report on Edward's death. By noon, David's bail was revoked. Ruth and I watched from the gallery as they led him away in chains. For the first time, he looked small. What now? Ruth asked, lighting a cigarette in the stairwell despite the no-smoking signs. I pulled out the final envelope from Martha's lockbox, the one I'd kept hidden even from the FBI. Inside lay a deed to the fishing cabin in Key Largo, a check for $1.2 million from Edward's recovered offshore funds, and a note. If you're reading this, the Oak gave up its secrets. Take the money and disappear, Sarah. You've earned a life without ghosts. The check fluttered in the AC breeze. Enough to vanish forever. Enough to give my mother the care she deserved. But then I remembered the camcorder footage, David's smirk as he shook Judge Renfrew's hand. How many others had they corrupted? The ledger hinted at more names, more graves. Ruiz found me staring at the courthouse steps. We could use your help with the other cases, she said, nodding to the envelope. But I'd understand if you walked away. A seagull cried overhead, sounding eerily like Martha's laugh. I thought of her paralyzed hands arranging this last gift, this escape hatch. She'd known I'd face this choice. I tore the check in half. Ruiz raised an eyebrow as the pieces fluttered into a storm drain. That's a statement. Someone needs to finish Martha's work. I handed her the envelope. Let's start with the medical examiner.
Back at the motel, my mother gasped when I showed her the cabin deed.
But it's yours. I pressed the keys into her hands. Ruth's driving you down tomorrow.
The security team stays as long as you need.
Her tears soaked into my shoulder. What about you? Through the window, I watched reporters swarm the courthouse.
Somewhere in that mess, David Whitfield's empire was crumbling brick by brick. And thanks to Martha, I held the wrecking ball.
I've got one last oak tree to dig up.
The old Whitfield corporate offices smelled like lemon polish and lies. 2 months after David's arrest, the court had granted me supervised access to the family's abandoned records. My boots echoed through the hollowed-out accounting department as FBI forensic techs hauled away boxes labeled Estate Holdings, Confidential. Agent Ruiz tapped a filing cabinet with E. Whitfield stenciled in faded gold letters. Medical examiner's trial starts Monday. He's already offered to testify about 3 other accidental deaths tied to David's business partners. I ran my fingers along the cabinet's edge until I felt the notch Martha had described in her diary. The false panel slid open with a whisper, revealing a slim black ledger. The pages contained no names, only coordinates and dates spanning 30 years.
Ruiz whistled.
Burial sites. My stomach twisted as I recognized the first set of numbers, the marshland where Edward's golf clubs had been accidentally discarded after his death. The most recent entry was dated 2 weeks before Martha's stroke. Lieutenant Carson's radio crackled as he entered.
We found Linda. His face was grim.
Holed up in a Bahamas resort.
Local cops say she had this on her nightstand. He tossed me a photo of my mother's Key Largo cabin. A red X marked the dock. The room swayed. All Martha's planning, all our careful victories, and Linda could still reach. Breathe. Ruiz steadied me. We moved your mom yesterday. She's at a Navy base until this wraps up.
She pried the ledger from my white-knuckled grip.
But we need you focused.
These coordinates could break decades of cold cases. A tech called out from David's old office. Behind a removed ceiling panel lay stacks of VHS tapes labeled with women's names.
My blood turned to ice.
None matched the dates in the ledger.
Ruiz's jaw tightened. He wasn't just hiding murders. He was collecting trophies. The door burst open. A young agent waved a court order. Whitfield's lawyer is screaming about evidence tampering.
Judge says we've got 1 hour before the crime scene gets locked down.
We worked in frenzied silence.
By the time the bailiffs arrived, we'd catalogued enough to put David away for 10 lifetimes. But as they escorted us out, I noticed a familiar name on the evidence log: camcorder, treehouse.
The original footage that started it all. Wait.
I grabbed Ruiz's sleeve.
Did anyone check the tape's full runtime?
The chain of custody paperwork revealed the truth. The FBI had only reviewed the first 3 minutes, the handshake with Judge Renfrew. But Martha's diary mentioned the camera running for 28 minutes after Edward's death. At the evidence locker, the tired clerk only shrugged.
DA's office has it now. Trial prep.
The walk to the prosecutor's office felt like wading through tar. DDA Vasquez's assistant said she was in a deposition, but the muffled voices behind her door told another story.
I recognized that honeyed drawl anywhere. Linda.
Through the cracked door, I watched her slide a photo across the table, my mother's cabin again, this time with a timestamp from yesterday.
Vasquez's face went pale. My brother's going free, Linda purred.
And you're going to lose that tape in transport.
Or the old lady takes a swim. I backed away before they could spot me.
Outside, Ruth waited in her idling truck, cigarette dangling from her lips.
Well,
they have the tape.
Linda's threatening my mom unless it disappears. My voice sounded hollow.
We need to.
Already handled.
Ruth tossed her phone into my lap. The screen showed a live feed of my mother sipping coffee in a sunny kitchen, not a Navy base, but some safe house with armed guards. Called in a favor from my ex-marshal days.
Even the DA doesn't know where she is.
The weight in my chest lessened, but not enough. Without that full tape, David walks.
Linda made sure of it. Ruth crushed her cigarette.
Then let's unmake it. The courthouse basement storage room had no cameras. Just rows of evidence lockers and an overworked night clerk Ruth distracted with a fake seizure. 90 seconds later, I was inside with the Whitfield box. The camcorder's battery was dead, but the tape.
My hands shook as I held it to the light.
The last 25 minutes were intact. The parking garage security footage would later show Ruth's truck peeling out at 9:47 p.m. By dawn, copies of the full recording had been delivered to every major news outlet, the FBI director's office, and, through back channels, to David's high-powered cellmate who'd been awaiting trial for tax fraud. The video showed everything. Edward's final moments. David's chilling calm as he staged the scene. And worst of all, Judge Renfrew arriving before the ambulance, pocketing Edward's watch as casually as taking a golf score. The scandal burned through the justice system like wildfire. By noon, the DA announced new charges against David. By 3 p.m., Linda was arrested attempting to flee the country. And at sunset, I stood in Martha's overgrown backyard as a forensic team excavated the last set of coordinates from the ledger. The oak tree's shadow stretched long across the fresh dig site when Ruiz approached. We found Edward's watch buried with Renfrew's old case files. She handed me a evidence bag containing a tarnished silver timepiece, the one from the tape. David must have planted it when Renfrew started talking to us. I ran my thumb over the engraving. To E, lover Martha's final gift to her husband, used to frame the man who helped kill him. The poetry of it would have made her smile. The trial lasted 6 weeks. David received 3 consecutive life sentences. Linda got 15 years for obstruction and witness intimidation. The recovered remains brought closure to 7 families. On the day of the estate settlement, I stood alone in Martha's house, my house now. The deed, the accounts, even the stolen jewelry recovered from Linda's safe deposit box, all legally mine. Yet the victory felt hollow without Martha there to see it. I was hanging her favorite painting when the doorbell rang. The delivery man held an oversized envelope marked from the office of DDA Vasquez. Inside, I found a note. Per Martha's instructions, held until the trial's conclusion. The contents spilled across the kitchen table. A set of blueprints for a non-profit called the Martha Whitfield Center for Domestic Violence Survivors, and a check for $5 million from Edward's seized offshore accounts. Her final surprise. The architect's rendering showed the oak tree preserved in a glass atrium, its roots protected beneath a plaque. The deepest truths grow where love takes root. I pressed the plans to my chest as the first real sob tore through me. Martha had known. Known I'd need a reason to stay. A way to make the pain matter. That night, I slept in her rocking chair, the way I had so many nights during her illness. The moonlight through the oak branches cast lace patterns across the floor. Somewhere between dreams, I felt her hand brush my hair, not paralyzed now, but strong and sure. You dug deep enough, she whispered. Now grow.